Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil on the show. This is our game day preview show. We are a couple days out from recording. Maybe it's the day of the game if you're listening to this, since it's a late start, 4:30 kick for Oregon at Penn State. This is the game that we've all been waiting for basically all off season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Dan Lanning's opening press conference was we're finally able to start talking about what you guys have been talking about uh, for the last couple of weeks, and that was in reference to Penn State. Oregon comes in ranked number 6 in the country. They are 4-0. They have a Big Ten win under their belt, which was a road game at Northwestern a couple of weeks ago. Penn State, number 3 in the country. They are coming into this one 3-0. This is their Big Ten opener. They had a bye week this past weekend, so they've had 2 weeks to essentially prepare for the Big Ten championship rematch. If you remember last season, these two teams met in Indianapolis. The Ducks won 45-37 to win their conference title in their first year in the Big Ten. And quite frankly, Oregon in the regular season has been absolutely dynamic, dating back to 2023 season when they were in the Pac-12. They've won 22 straight games in the regular season. They are 14-0 against, or not 14-0. They are 10-0 against Big Ten opponents in the regular season. They are 11-0 against Big Ten opponents if you count the Big Ten championship game with that. They've yet to,
I hate to say it, Matt. They're also 11-1 if you count another Big Ten team that they played a game later in the year as well.
That's true. That's also true. But that's a postseason game. And we're also trying to skew the stats here a little bit, jokingly. 9 straight road wins for the Ducks under Dan Lanning. This is Oregon's off to as good of a start as you could imagine, I think, in the conference in the Dan Lanning era. And it's culminating in a absolutely massive showdown. It's going to be a whiteout. It's going to be prime time, 7:30 kick local back in University Park, 4:30 kick out west for us folks out here. And it's a game against another top 5 opponent, a blue blood, a signature program. And the season's not going to be decided on this game, but a lot of its narratives could be shaped by what happens on Saturday.
Yeah, no question. By the way, just like I'm giddy like it's Christmas right now. It's so exciting to finally see this team, I hate to say it, like play a good opponent and just to get a sense of where they are. I mean, there were so many question marks coming into the year. It was made more difficult by just the lack of practice access. And I just felt like we didn't really have a great sense of who this team really was. You know, it's obviously a massive number of starter turnover and just a totally different team. And then they played, I hate to say it, they played 4 teams that they were just completely outclassed and not competitive really in any of those games in the second half. You know, games where they're leading, 41-3 at half and 38-3 at half, 20-0 at half. I mean, games where it's just not competitive at intermission, and then you get the second half and it's more of a conversation of like, when do the second team guys come in as opposed to how do these guys fare in a big game in the second half. So a lot of answers, I think, to be had here. It does feel, I said this on the Penn State podcast I did yesterday with Tyler Donahue, who, if you want to get the lowdown from his perspective, very informative 35-minute podcast we had on Tuesday with Tyler. I said, and I think this is true, it does feel like if you were, at the bottom of a staircase, Oregon took a couple steps really slowly up the first 4 weeks, and now they're like leaping up 5 or 6 steps to go from Oregon State, Oklahoma State, Montana State, Northwestern to Penn State, who could very well be one of the very best teams in the country. So fascinating game, a lot of things that we're going to get into, a lot of game. I think, frankly, like I'm almost more excited just to fast forward to Saturday and just to have answers, even if it's in a game that's disappointing for several reasons. Like it's going to be really a crucial game for just kind of having an assessment on where this team's at, what's realistic. Is a Big Ten title still feel like it's very much in the cards? Does that now feel like it's something that would be a long shot? How does this shape the Indiana game, which could be a couple of top 10 teams at Autzen Stadium in a couple of weeks based upon what the Hoosiers just did to Illinois last week? So much going on here, and I'm just excited to get to Saturday and see where these guys are at.
I go into this game thinking a couple things. One, it feels like there's zero pressure on Oregon to win this football game. And I say that for multiple reasons. One, schedule gets released. We find out what the rosters look like back in, let's just say January, February. And we're looking at the schedule. We're talking about the rosters. We're looking at everybody else who chose to come back to school. And the natural assumption, I'm part of this. And unless you're, if you can look at things with a clear eye and eliminate your biases, I think you look at this and say, hey, back in February, back in March, back at the beginning of August, this is probably a loss for Oregon. You're on the road. You're an inexperienced team from a on-field perspective. That doesn't mean you're not talented, but you're inexperienced. You've got a first-year starting quarterback who's a sophomore. You have to replace essentially everybody across the board. The opponent that you're playing is bringing back multiple NFL guys from a team that made the semifinals last season. They've got what was projected to be a first-round NFL quarterback, a guy that could argue going into the season, maybe in the running for the top quarterback job. He's a former 5-star. He's a 4-year player at Penn State. Everything kind of sets up for Penn State to win this game. Not to say it's going to be a blowout or anything, but just you look at it and say, hey, probably a game Oregon's going to lose. Games start getting played, and I think my decision is starting to on this game is starting to change. It's starting to evolve as games are starting to be played, because you look at how Oregon's played, how Penn State has played. They have not looked good in their first 3 games of the year. They've looked elite at times, and they've looked very mediocre at other chunks of time these last 3 games. And they've played a weaker schedule. Neither team has played anybody with a pulse. And I was blown away when you brought this up earlier in the week that that Penn State has even a weaker schedule than Oregon, because good golly, I don't think it could have gotten any weaker for Oregon.
Right.
They've already played a team that's fired their coach. There's another coach that they've played that's potentially going to get fired maybe mid-season or at the end of the year. They're playing an FCS team that's not living up to expectations there. And then they played a really weak Big Ten team in Northwestern, who quite frankly won't have the talent to maybe win more than 3 games. And somehow Penn State has found a schedule that's even softer than that. But Drew Aller hasn't looked like the Drew Aller maybe people anticipated. Dante Moore is probably better than expected from the beginning of the year. I think you brought up the mental aspect earlier this week and how important that is for the psyche of games. I think James Franklin, fair or not, got the monkey of can't win the truly big game in the regular season on his back. And they've been in the pressure cooker. There's one thing about having a bye week ahead of this game. One, it gives you more time to prepare. But 2, it gives you an extra whole week to set in this pressure cooker and hearing the talk about, well, if they can't win this one with everything set up in their way, why are they going to win at Ohio State down the road? Why is it going to be different down the road if they can't win this one when it's a whiteout, it's at home, it's a primetime game, it's against an inexperienced quarterback, it's against a young team. If they can't win this one, why can't they? Why is it going to be different? I think there's that angle too. And this line, Erik, hasn't moved at all. It's 3.5 in favor of Penn State. If it was going to be a monumental shift in terms of Penn State's way, it would start happening now, and it hasn't. I also think Oregon's coaching staff against Penn State's coaching staff, like fair or not, James Franklin always kind of turtles up a little bit and becomes very conservative in these big moments. Dan Lanning becomes ultra aggressive, and we've seen it hurt him against Washington, the 4th down calls in 2022 and 2023. But to me, it's more the mindset. And I tend to lean with a guy that, hey, let's go be aggressive and try to win. And if we fail, we lose, then let's be conservative and try not to lose and lose. And I'm always going to side with the coach that's kind of maybe too aggressive than not enough. But I don't know. My opinion of this matchup is changing as this season plays out. And I'm opening up my eyes a little bit more to the possibility that Oregon goes down and wins this game on the road in a hostile environment.
Yeah, I think to be fair to us also, I think even when we were picking Penn State preseason, because I think for both of us, that was the one loss we had on the books. I think it was with the understanding, like it was not ever, I never at least thought, oh, Oregon doesn't have a chance. They don't stack up here. Because we knew.
Very true.
Right? Like we knew, like you look at the team talent composite, which I think came out right around the time we made those picks. Oregon is 5 and Penn State's 10. Like we knew Oregon had a roster absolutely on paper to match up with Penn State. The kind of I guess dilemma for us was like, what is this Oregon team? So I mean, they returned 4 starters, and I think Penn State returns 14, including like 9 on offense. They have their whole offensive line back. Like that kind of logic, the fact that, I mean, I really do feel like if you're stacking up like the factors in this game, and especially the ones that favor Penn State, like number one is the whiteout. Like we were walking over to and back and forth on Wednesday from Oregon Media Day, from interviews, I should say, and you could hear Mo Bamba playing and the crowd noise. And I received a text later in the day from a buddy with that Michigan first play of the game and whatever that was 4 or 5 years ago, and just how loud that was and like what impacts that can have. Like that really feels like the X factor for Penn State, along with the run game, which has become kind of like the huge story all week. Fair or not, based upon kind of, I mean, Oregon did win that game, giving up almost 300 yards, we have to acknowledge. So those are kind of the factors. But like, I think if you want to like slanted Oregon's way, and I guess getting back to the original point of like, I never felt like Oregon couldn't win this game. It just felt like it was safer almost to pick Penn State. And I don't know if we'll get to predictions end of the show. I might disappoint people. I don't know if my mind has completely shifted, not to spoil it, but like, I think Oregon's ahead of schedule. I will say that. And I don't think many people who've watched this team would disagree. You look at just really almost across the board position wise, they've outperformed my expectation. I think especially at quarterback, and I've gotten some pushback from people on the Penn State side of things on this, but I think Dante Moore is an edge over Drew Aller at quarterback. And I don't know if I went into the season expecting to say that, especially like game 5, right? Like week 5 of the season, it was kind of like Drew Aller's been in big games. He hasn't necessarily thrived, but he's been there. And we saw, even in a losing effort last year, I know the run game gets all the glory. He made some really big plays down the stretch to make it interesting. I know he had 2 interceptions, one of which kind of put the game away at the end, but like he was up for the moment there. We didn't know if that would be the case with Dante Moore. And that still is kind of TBD for me of like what exactly he's going to be in this environment. But what he's been in other games so far, that's like who these guys have been through this point of the season to now. I think it's pretty clearly tips in Oregon's favor. I mean, Dante's been ahead of Drew in just about every passing stat you could look at, and just about every way of measuring this. The PFF grades heavy favor Dante Moore. So you go into a game in a tough environment and you have one of those guys at quarterback, you give yourself a shot. And like, I think that's to me a core reason for like having optimism this weekend. I don't know if I have much conviction one way or the other, but like, if you're trying to make the case for Oregon, to me, it starts with, it seems like Dante Moore's up for this. And it seems like he has at least 3, maybe 4 guys he's really comfortable throwing the ball with. And to me, those, like the passing game going in, was probably the biggest question mark. New quarterback, Evan Stewart's gone. Unfortunately, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Terrence Ferguson, a bunch of these kind of key players from last year's pass game are gone. Like, how did they retool and restock? And I've been about as impressed with that as anything else on this team so far.
I'm a firm believer that Oregon's playmaking abilities are different at the receiver position than they were a year ago. And think about, they've got 2 NFL guys at receiver, and they have an NFL tight end. They have 2 NFL tight ends. Herbert's on the practice squad for the Jags right now. I think Oregon's receivers last season were dynamic. They were electric. They were extremely fast. But you had to kind of scheme their way into being open. And you had to get them in open space to let them do their work. I think Dorian Moore has shown, especially this past weekend against Oregon State. Granted, It's Oregon State. No one's going to sit here and say their DBs are on par with Penn State's because they're not. They're not even close. And that needs to be taken into account. But I think Oregon has shown that Dante Moore is that guy that can go up and just you're in the backyard football. You're at the schoolyard recess and you're playing the 12-on-12 two-hand touch football, and you've got your buddy who's really good and really athletic, and basically the play you just go deep, and I'm just going to throw it to you, and I don't care where it goes, just go get it, and he always goes and gets it and wins. That's Dante Moore. They have that element, and they've not had that since Dan Lanning's been here at Oregon. I don't think even Troy Franklin was that type of guy where
who's been that guy in Oregon history? We've been around this program for a long time. I can't think of anybody who you had that kind of faith with, to be honest.
Maybe Lavassier Tuine, maybe.
Yeah.
But
very, very different players.
Very different player. I mean, and Tuine, it's only because he was 6'6", and not because he was this unbelievable athlete. But to your point, yeah, they maybe never had that guy. And I actually think Malik Benson is that type of guy as well. And they still have the speed, a.k.a. Benson, a.k.a. Dante Moore, just going straight over the top. They still have the possession guy going across the middle, and Gary Bryant. I think J-Mac has shown to be starting to be a possible player that you can depend upon. And it sounds like they're getting Justice Lowe back for this week, which we know he can do some things across the middle. He's a tenacious blocker. I think Oregon's receiving core isn't just better. I think they're significantly better than Penn State's. I would probably agree with you right now. Dante Moore looks like the more polished, the better quarterback than Drew Aller. I've seen this story time and time again where a guy is underperformed and all of a sudden he plays Oregon and steps up and just has an unbelievably lights out performance. That seems to always happen.
Wouldn't count him out on a big stage, I don't think. I know they've lost a lot of these big games, but like I said, I still have memories of Indy from last year with him.
So I'm not gonna sit here and say Drew Aller's not gonna have a game, but I saw this, I think it was on the Cover 3 podcast. Do you know the last time he threw for more than 250 yards in a game? Drew Aller?
I've not done the Drew Aller stat deep dive. 2020.
It's almost a year ago. Okay. At USC, October 12th, in overtime when he threw 391. He threw for 226 against Oregon. Every other game has basically been in the low 200s, to mid 200s, or high 100s. This season, you look at his stat line, it's 217, it's 200, it's 209, 4 total touchdowns, 1 interception. He's completing 64% of his passes, but the last 2 games, that's inflated stats because the last 2 games, it's 57.6 and 55.2. He completed 84% of his passes week 1 against Nevada for only 217 yards, 22 completions out of 26 attempts. He's not been on par yet. So the question becomes for me, is this going to be the game where all of a sudden he explodes and starts playing like the Drew Aller preseason hype, which we've seen that story happen before, especially against Oregon? Or does his struggles continue and Oregon can Oregon capitalize on that? Because I think you look at this Penn State offense and they are extremely scary up front with Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton at running back. And I think the game plan is going to be, as crazy as it sounds when you look at preseason hype, load the box and live and die by Drew Aller beating you. And if he wins those battles, you just tip your cap, you walk away. But it has to be stop the run, and it should be, and they should be motivated about it by the 297 that Penn State put up on them last year.
Yeah, I was going to say my response when you're kind of outlining the 2 Drew Aller possibilities is door number 3 is it kind of almost doesn't matter just because they could run the ball with such success, and you know I'm fascinated. Like I know that's become the storyline for everybody, but I think it's reasonable to ask, like, what is Oregon's defense going to show against this run attack? Which again, it's those 2 guys. It's also the fact that like they have all 5 offensive line starters back. Like this is, you look at, I mean, they're Oregon and Penn State both basically lost all pass catchers of note last year. Difference is Penn State brings their quarterback back. Oregon does not. But it's the fact that like Penn State has its 2 running backs, and these guys are as accomplished as anybody in the country. I mentioned it on our podcast earlier. I think Tyler also mentioned like good high likelihood that Allen and Singleton are 1 and 2 on the school's all-time rushing list, which means they're going to be ahead of guys like Saquon Barkley. I mean, that tells you kind of what they are. But then it's also they have that whole offensive line back. So it's an operation that has a continuity advantage over Oregon. So like, and we should know, like Oregon last year was really good up front.
Oh,
Like 3 guys in the first 3 rounds of the draft, 1 guy went in the first round. You know, these are guys in the middle of the defense of front. You know,
I mean, and think about the guys that are on this team that played in that game. Bryce Betcher is going to be an NFL guy. Mateo Uyunglele is going to be an NFL guy. Tatum Tuioti is going to be an NFL guy. I think Mari Washington played a little bit in that game.
Yeah, he played quite a bit.
An NFL guy. Like, it's not just that they had 3 dudes that aren't on the team anymore. They probably got 4 or 5 more that are going to be NFL that were also in that game, and they still gave up almost 300 yards of offense.
Yeah, and I'm still, I guess my big point of curiosity was, and it'd be interesting to see if his game plays out similarly. But I think Dan kind of acknowledged it was kind of going to be a quick comment, and I'd have to go back and find exactly what was said. But somebody did ask about the rush defense, and his kind of point was there are things we're willing to give up because Oregon was playing with the lead. You know, they hit the first couple punches, they scored early, they had the turnover that led to points. So they were playing with kind of an edge there. And I think they were comfortable saying, we're going to let them run a little bit more. You know, what happens in this game where, maybe they don't have that advantage, and are they able to just, like you say, sell out, stop the run, put it on Drew Aller's shoulders and see what he can do? I think that's the question. And like piggybacking off of that point is, we kind of don't know exactly where Drew Aller is at in terms of like, we've seen him last year at times against Oregon be really impressive. But this year at times he's looked good, but other times he's not looked, most recently has not been impressive. And that's not just us, the Oregon people, saying that was what Tyler Donahue was saying on our podcast on Tuesday. Like that's a big question, is like, how ready is he for this? But the other question is like, how ready is Oregon secondary? And that's the youngest part of this team. They do have Thieneman and Kennedy, and Theron Johnson, who are these senior veteran guys who've been in big games and big moments. Obviously, not in the case of a game quite like this. Maybe Kennedy has at Ole Miss playing some big games, but I don't think Thieneman or Theron Johnson playing at Purdue and Northwestern. Really, they played Penn State, both of them, but those weren't games quite like this. But it's the other guys. It's the true corners off the edge there, the freshmen, and it's Aaron Flowers. And it's, how does that youth stack up? I think physically, like Obadegwu and Finney have the advantage on some of these athletes for Penn State. Like I don't think it's an athleticism deficit, but it's an experience deficit. So like Oregon's done an incredible, like if we talk about the passing game, go look at the stats. Oregon's pass defense has been as good as about anybody in the country. They're coming off a game where they're facing an Oregon State offense that its entire identity was basically throwing the football. And Malik Murphy had like the worst passing game that an Oregon defense had allowed in, like, what was it, since 2007, since I was in high school. Like, that's notable. So I'm really curious to see what it looks like this week. If it comes down to, hey, Oregon's actually able to take the run away effectively, and it's Drew Aller is forced to really shoulder the load here, and those receivers are really asked to kind of win. How good is Oregon's secondary in taking that away? Like that's like they have not faced anything quite like this from an environment perspective, but also, a game environment. And I'm fascinated to see these younger players and what they look like. I mean, those are, again, and the great part about the way college football has moved is Oregon can lose this game and still be in the driver's seat to play in the college football playoff, could still end up in the Big Ten championship game. And even if they don't make the Big Ten championship game, and even if they lost a second time, they probably still have a chance if it's the right loss and they have the right wins. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing on Saturday. And even if it's in a losing effort, I think we can come away feeling like we have a way better idea about who this team is, and especially some of these young guys. There's
also a lot of pressure, I think, on Dante Moore. We should not just sit here and talk about the pressure on Drew Aller. I went back and looked at his stats. Granted, look, you're comparing a guy as a true freshman playing in a different system, playing on a different team with different players around him. So that all of that context matters. But when he was at UCLA, he played 3 weeks in a row against ranked opponents. It was not pretty. They lost at Utah 14-7. They beat Washington State the following week or 2 weeks later after a bye at home, 25-17. And then they went on the road the next week against number 15 Oregon State, and they lost that one 36-24. And if you look at Dante Moore's stats across those 3 games, 3 total touchdown passes, 6 total interceptions. He didn't rush for any touchdowns. He completed less than 46% of his passes, and his best number was 290 against Washington State when he completed the best of the 3, 50% of his passes. He was sacked 16 times in those 3 games. He was completely under duress. Now, different team, different scheme, different players, all that matters. The guys he's with at Oregon, significantly better. He's more seasoned. He's more improved. He has a better understanding of the game himself. He himself has improved. That all will factor in here, but when he's played 3 opponents previously as a starting quarterback, it didn't necessarily go all that well. How does he handle the pressure? That comes with, to me, it reminds me of Kenyon Sadiq when he said, "This is the most calm, cool, collected quarterback I've ever played with." And remember, he's played with Bo Nix and he's played with Dylan Gabriel. And then I think you asked Poncho about it as well, and he brought the same thing up.
Yeah, that was the through line. And I'll have a story up on the site later today being Thursday, just about that and kind of collecting some quotes. And Dan said it. You mentioned those 2 said it. I think Mateo even acknowledged it. Like, they think he's ready for this moment. And really, he has to be for Oregon to win this game. Like, he's been, again, so ahead of schedule for more of my expectations, where that's not to think I thought he was going to be bad, but I would not have expected the touchdown interception ratio to be 11-1 coming in. I wouldn't expect him to be completing almost 75% of his passes. I was thinking his stat line would be like, maybe 3 or 4 interceptions at this point in the season. And maybe that was too much based on the competition, but I had some concerns about kind of what this was going to look like. I knew he had the talent. I also knew the reputation at UCLA was one thing, even though that reputation differed from what it was in high school. In high school, it was like, this guy makes all the right decisions. He's a heady quarterback. So much of this has had to do, Matt, with, by the way, he's had 1 sack. And he's been under pressure a handful of times all year. And when he has been under pressure, he's made the right calls. So Saturday is going to be imperative that he continues to be that player. And I think it was notable when you said 16 sacks in those 3 games. I thought, gosh, I don't think he's going to have 16 sacks all season at Oregon. But if there's a game where they could get to him a lot, it's this one. And that's another thing for me, right? We talk about, Oregon needing to win on the trenches against the Penn State rush attack. It's really important on the other side of the ball that Oregon's offensive line hold its water too. And in pass protection, I think especially, because I think they're going to be able to run the ball with some success. I don't, maybe you disagree. I don't think this is a game where you're they're going to carve them up and run for 200 yards on the ground. I don't anticipate that. Maybe I'll be completely wrong and I'll eat those words on Saturday, but I do think you're going to have to protect Dante Moore. And I don't think he's going to be sacked 6, 7, 8 times. I think that's unrealistic, but I also think he's going to face a lot more pressure than he has in any of the games combined to this point. And how does he handle that? And how does he handle the atmosphere and the environment? And I'm with you. I really stood out with those teammates and Dan said about just kind of his temperament and how he carries himself. This is a totally different test. He's been on the road one time and there was legitimately 100,000 fewer fans. You were there in Northwestern.
Think about that comment and it being true. There's legitimately 100,000 fewer fans.
Yeah. So couldn't be more different environments to enter. And I've said it all week. I really think if Oregon, and they've been awesome in their opening drives all season with the exception of Northwestern. It was the only time they kind of sparred early. If they can come out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win the toss and they have the chance that they want to receive, because I think Dan wants to start this way. But if they can land the first couple punches, build the lead, quiet the crowd a little bit, I think that goes a massive way, not only in building confidence on their sideline, but in just having an advantage here. If you force Penn State to play from behind like they did last year, it would have been really interesting if the tables were turned and Oregon was down, 2 scores early against Penn State last year, how that game goes differently, because with Penn State playing with the lead is a very different animal than Penn State playing behind. So that first quarter feels really, really key, and they cannot make the kind of mistakes they did against Oregon State. They've got to go out there. They can't turn over and downs and punt it on 2 of their first 3 drives. They've got to go out and put points on the board and build a lead.
All right. Let's take a quick break, unless you got anything left to unload in the info booth here. Do we got anything left?
I guess I mentioned just one name that we haven't brought up that we need to. Dennis Sutton, who's about as good of an edge guy as you're going to face. And we talk about the pressure Dante might face. That's one of a couple names. Chaz Coleman, a younger edge rusher who's also been really effective. Those are just 2 names to be aware of on Saturday coming off the edge that could make things tough for Dante.
Let's take a quick break. Let's come back. We'll dive into our bold predictions for this weekend's game. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Time to break out the bold predictions. And Erik, I felt like last week we were really good with our picks, and I think we came incredibly close to hitting on basically all of them. But both you and I went 1-4 on our predictions, and it was like the slimmest of margins. And I think that's sports. Like, you could play an incredibly good game and still find a way to lose ugly. And that's what we did last week. We were really there, but we just didn't get over the hump.
Yeah, let's bring us in like we were actually playing the game and we were involved. You're right. We played such a good game, Matt. We were so in it, and we just lost ugly. Gosh, feels good to be back.
How about you go first with offensive team?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I usually these bold predictions are like super slanted in the positive direction, and some of these will be for this, but this one is not, and it's just to bring up the fact I talked about first halves. Oregon scored points on 18 of 22 first half drives this year, and touchdowns on 16 of 22. That's like 82%, 73%, respectively. Just the point is they've been awesome. I've got them scoring points on less than half of their first half drives. I don't think they're shut out. I don't think they don't score in this game. I don't think they don't get to the end zone. I think they'll get there multiple times. I don't think it's going to be quite like what we've seen. Maybe it's not bold to suggest that, but for an offense that's been averaging over 50 points and is kind of done whatever it's needed to do, whatever it's wanted to do, I don't think that's what we see on Saturday. There's going to be a much larger path to resistance. So scoring on less than half of the first half drives. I'm
going the opposite direction here.
Ooh, I like it.
I kind of think defense. I think this is going to be a very similar game to what we saw in Indy. Offenses are going to be really humming. I'm actually anticipating Oregon going over 425 yards of total offense. And the last time that's happened for a Penn State team in the regular season, 3 years ago, almost on Halloween, 10-29-22 at home. They gave up 452, and that was against number 4 Ohio State, a 44-31 game. I think this is going to be one of those games where it's going to be back and forth, up and down. They gave up 409 at USC last year, but that was also an overtime game. They won that one 33-30. But I'm going Oregon's offense rolls up 425 or more yards in this one, and it's going to be the most that Penn State will have allowed in the regular season since at least 2022.
Well, I'm going to help you with this Dante Moore prediction. I think he's going because I think he's going to be asked to do a lot in this game. I really do, and I've got him season high in pass yards, season high in pass attempts. Both were set last week: 305 pass yards, 31 attempts. I think he's going to hit over on both of those. The first 3 games he was averaging, like 220 yards through the air. Just about 20 pass attempts, and that was when things were really cooking. He was also playing, like 2.5 quarters per game. They played him deeper into that game. They wanted to get him more experience. I thought he answered the call extremely well. I think he's going to be asked to do a lot in this game. I've got him 305 or more pass yards, or I guess 306 or more pass yards, and then 32 or more attempts.
I like that because that goes right into my individual pick. I'm also in agreement. I think this is going to be a game Oregon's going to lean on Dante Moore a ton, and he's going to have to step up. And if he doesn't, Oregon's in a lot of trouble. I don't think Oregon's going to win this game with a ground and pound style attack through the ground with whoever's back there at running back. And because of that, I think Corey Moore is going to have a big game. Corey Moore has had three total carries in, this season. They came in the first 2 weeks. I think that was kind of by design. Show a little bit of what he can do, pull it back. A couple weeks now, it's not as much as frequent in the play calls. I think that's coming back. I think we're going to see Corey Moore getting the ball in space, whether it's screens, fly sweeps, what have you. But I think he finishes the game with 120 all-purpose yards or more. This is going to be kind of his – like he's already kind of broken out nationally, but this is where he turns into, hey, Oregon's playing, you've got to watch Corey Moore. He's an unbelievable talent. This is that game that kind of creates that discussion. Corey Moore, 120 all-purpose yards or more in this game.
Going to defensive team, and I'm still trying to figure out why this is bold, Matt. Because is it bold because it's an improvement on rush defense, or is it bold because it's still a lot of yards to give up? So I've got Oregon allows about 200 to 225. Like, give myself a range, 200 to 225 rush yards. And I picked those numbers because that's only happened 5 times that Oregon has allowed 200 or more yards on the ground. Obviously, last year's game against Penn State. Also last year, people forget Purdue ran for 208. Boise State, people don't forget. Ashton Genty ran for whatever he wanted to. And then people also don't forget this one, Oregon State in 2022. The other time they hit over 200 yards, that was 268 in Corvallis in a game where they only ran the football in the second half because that's all they needed to do. Again, I don't know if it's bold because I'm looking at it being a pretty big improvement, or if it's bold because that's still a lot of rushing yards. But yeah, I've got between 200 to 225. Give myself a small range here. It still would be quite a bit more than the past 4 games this season. But I don't think they're going to hit 300 yards on the ground, to be clear. And I wanted to avoid that narrative, but I don't think it's like, hey, they completely fixed it and the rush defense shuts down Katron Allen, Nick Singleton either.
That's funny because I had the exact same pick right there. So I will pivot, and it's an easy one for me to pivot because I think if you look at Oregon's defense, they've been dynamite against the pass this season. They haven't allowed a touchdown pass through the air this season. And that's quickly looking at it from a game standpoint. It's the longest streak that I can find since at least the 2019 season. They had 3 straight games without an interception without a touchdown in 2019. Actually, it's 2016 now. I'm keeping going through it here. Yeah, so at least since 2016, they haven't had that stretch for 4 games in a row. But where I'm going with this is I think Oregon's going to give up a lot of points on the ground. Obviously, I was predicting a 220 rushing total. That's still a ton of yards. I think Penn State's going to run for 4 or more touchdowns in this game, and that's the most that Oregon has allowed in a regular season, in any game since that Oregon State game in 2022. And before that, they also gave up 4 that same season, week 1 against Georgia. I think Oregon's defense is going to give up some points, and a lot of it's going to come on the ground with a highly successful run game.
Do you think they give up their first passing touchdown?
Yes.
They do? Okay. So you're going pretty high scoring here. If
I am.
Okay. All right. I've got individual defense to wrap up the kind of props here. This guy shows up in the big games. It's Bryce Betcher. I thought he was going to have 20 tackles last week. It felt like in the first half he had 9, and I was like, this guy's just going to I don't know. The last time somebody had close to 20 probably was like a Troy Dye. I know Michael Clay against Stanford had like over 20 way back in the day. Gosh, 10, 12 years ago probably now. His career high is 11. He did it in 2 rivalry games last year, Oregon State and Washington. I think he's going to surpass that. I think he gets 12 or more tackles. Part of that is we touched on it. Like, they're going to run the ball. They're going to run it between the tackles. Bryce is going to be around. Kind of surprised. I think he only had like half that number last year in Penn State or against Penn State, like 6 or 8. I think he is so motivated and has shown up in the big moments so far in his career. So I like him to be very involved, in part because of the game plan for Penn State. I think is going to be to run probably right in his direction. So I'll take 12 or more for Mr. Betcher, the Eugene kid.
I was also going to go with Bryce Betcher for career high in tackles, but I'm changing it to another guy that I think is very likely to hit double digits. I don't know if I'm going to say career high because it's 14, and that's an insanely high number, but Dylan Dinneman. I'm going 10 or more tackles for Dylan Dinneman for Oregon at the safety position. I think we're going to see one thing that we've noticed with this year's defense is Oregon going with 3 safety looks and bringing oftentimes Dylan Dinneman, sometimes it's Kingston Lopa, kind of like right behind the linebackers, kind of playing a position that's like a hybrid linebacker / safety, and they really want him coming up and hitting the run. And knowing how proficient and how good Penn State is up front, I think that Oregon's going to be really adamant about we cannot let them just kind of ground and pound us if your Oregon's coach is talking. And that's going to be the chess move. Can Penn State throw and create space where Dylan Dinneman has to start creeping back? They have to get away from him playing close to the line of scrimmage. But because if they can't, I think he's going to have a field day. So I'm going 10 or more tackles for Dylan Dinneman. That would be double his high at Oregon this season. His high right now is 5. He's done it 2 times this season already. And then he's done 4 as well. That's a lot, but I'm anticipating there's going to be an opportunity here for a ton of carries and a ton of tackles. So I'm going Dylan Dinneman, 10 or more tackles.
We haven't really had the Dylan Dinneman game yet either, right?
No.
Like I'm not belittling his play at all. I think he's been really impressive.
He's not been needed.
I was just going to say, but they haven't really needed it. And he's another big game player. I like that one, Matt. All right, we're moving on to the score predictions.
Yep.
I know people are going to get mad at me in the comments because I'm picking Penn State to win. Sticking with the preseason prediction, I lack conviction. I think, like, frankly, if you're being honest with yourself, if you're an Oregon supporter, I think you don't know a ton about this team still. I know Penn State doesn't know a ton about its team. There's so many question marks for me about going into this environment with the young roster. How much of what we've seen through 4 games is this team is elite, A+, PFF grades in the 90s, and how much is it a byproduct of they played 4 cupcakes and did what they were supposed to against better competition? I think it's a mix, and I think we're going to come out of this game, win or loss, and especially if it's a loss with a score like I've got, saying maybe they're not the best team in the country, but gosh, they have so much talent here. They have so much ability. There's still a ceiling here to climb to, where when we get to November, December, and January, they're going to still be in the conversation for the whole thing. Like that. So that's my caveat before I break hearts and say Penn State 27-24. A really close, low-scoring game by Oregon standards. Oregon held about half of its average scoring on the season. I kind of said it earlier. I wonder what happens if Penn State holds control early and can kind of play a ground and pound game. And that's kind of what I'm expecting. I'm expecting they strike first. Oregon sputters a little early, having to deal with kind of the crowd noise. I'm building this narrative, at least. It could go the opposite way, and I wouldn't be surprised all that much either way. I mean, I would say, like, I'm really 50-50, but sticking with my preseason prediction. But I think if that's the scenario, I think Penn State's able to get enough done to win. If it's a game where Oregon gets the lead, like, I could see Oregon, to me, it's almost like Oregon wins 27-24, Oregon wins like 42-31. Like, those are like the two spectrums I'm kind of looking at this from, and I'm leaning it's going to be a little more difficult early in the season. And frankly, like, it's not a bad thing to take a lump or two early in the year, especially in the new college football playoff format. Like, you lose this game, but it's a competitive loss. People don't overlook you. And then you go out and you rattle off 7 more wins to finish regular season play. Maybe you're in the Big Ten championship game, maybe you're not, but you're very much in contention still to make a run in January. And I still, that's been my talking points haven't changed. I thought this is a team that's going to have some ups and downs early, and then by the time you get to the games that really matter, there's not going to be a scarier team in the country. I think we see hints and kind of shades of that in this one, but not enough to win.
I had Oregon losing this game when the schedule came out. I had them losing this game in February, going into spring football, coming out of spring football in July, going into the fall camp, exiting fall camp, going into week 1 of this season. But I have a hard time picking against Oregon. I'm going to pick them to win. And a lot of the reasons are because of what we've seen with our eyes and not what we know on paper, where these teams were going into the season. I don't think Penn State is the number 3 team in the country if preseason rankings weren't made until this week. They haven't shown anything to signify that they are the number 2 or the number 3 team in the country. And Oregon has certainly shown they are every bit and they are every much worthy of being a top 6, top 5, depending on poll you use, team. And yeah, they haven't played anybody either, but they've done what you were supposed to do. And leave no doubt, absolute demolish your opponent. Now, Penn State's defense has done that.
Yep.
They have shown up. They have looked terrific. They have dominated their opponent, but the offense has struggled. And I keep going back to, I always side with the guy that's willing to go risk the game, to go win the game, than the guy that's willing to try and not make a mistake to win the game. And I feel like that's a description of these two coaches. And sometimes Lanning has gotten burned for that. And I think there's going to be opportunities where I think Oregon's purposely going to try and put Penn State in some difficult positions here of, hey, if you want to win this game, James, you got to go for the 4th and 4 at the 38 instead of kicking the field goal, because we're going for it too. And if we convert it and we score a touchdown, now you can't trade points. Very similar to what happened in the Big Ten championship game. I think Oregon has the best receiver in this game. I think they've got the better quarterback in this game. I think Penn State probably has the better defense in this game, but I don't think the margins are going to be extremely wide in both those. And I'm gonna lean with the fact that Dan Lanning's teams at Oregon have always kind of shown up for
absolutely
for these moments. They've not won all of them, that's certain, but they've all kind of shown up. They've all played extremely well. They've only had one game, 2, I guess, if you count Georgia, game 1 of the Dan Lanning era. But they've only had one game where they didn't look like they were ready, or maybe I hate to use the word they didn't belong, but that was the Rose Bowl. But no one really belonged against Ohio State outside of the one Oregon win in October against that same team at home. I'm picking Oregon. I think it's going to be a back and forth game. Again, I think both offenses are going to have field days. 38-35 Oregon. I think Oregon kind of either kicks a field goal late to win the game, or they possess the ball and just kind of milk the game away in the last couple of minutes to walk out of Penn State with a 38-35 victory to improve to 5-0.
I'm going to ask you to do a thing I know you hate doing. What's your, on a scale of 1 to 10, your confidence meter on that?
5.
Okay, because mine's like 3. I don't have really any confidence one way or the other, and that's why, like, I wish.
Let me rephrase that. I said 5 because it's like 50-50 chance this actually happens. So I guess, like, similar to you then, like 1 or a 2 or a 3. Like, I have a ton of confidence in picking Oregon to win, but just the history, knowing this team, knowing where the other team is at in a big game moment. And I really think, like, go look at social media posts and polls and predictions, and there's a lot of Penn State fans freaking out about this game. And they have been in this hot box for 2 weeks. The pressure cooker of big game, big game, big game, big game. You have to win, you have to win, you have to win. Oregon hasn't been in that mindset for the last 2 weeks. You know, I really think that matters too here.
Just the last thing I'd say in my confidence meter, it'd be a lot higher one way or the other if we just inverted these next 2 games. Like if Indiana at home was this week, bye week, sure. Penn State on the road. It's just there's so little, and it'd be great also if like Penn State played anybody that was good. And I'm looking at their schedule after this. Even it's pretty. They go UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, and then they play Ohio State on November 1st. It would just be great to know kind of where these teams really are. Yeah, who they are actually, and that's what's going to be great about Saturday is we're going to learn a heck of a lot. And I'm I'm along for the ride. I guess is what I'll say. I will also note, people asked, because we mentioned on the Tuesday show with Tyler, we won't be at Penn State. Sister's getting married. My coverage is going to be a little limited. I'll probably be in a tuxedo for our post-game pod, which might drop a little bit later on Saturday than normal. But just wanted to offer a little bit of an explanation on that for people who haven't been on our site where we've done a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, you will not see me after Saturday night, Sunday morning on the podcast for quite some time. I'm taking some leave to deal with some family stuff that's come up, take care of my wife. So I will not be there as well. I was originally going to be after Jared left, but sometimes life has other plans for both of us. But we will be on the show. We will be doing some kind of a podcast Saturday night. That's the next time you'll hear from us here on the show. Until then, though, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.